We have a citizen. A citizen. How well? Yes, we are. We're a couple of files in this week's folder that get request access.
I think because when I sent it to you guys, I granted access to you guys for review. And then they were included in the minutes, so I didn't get a chance to grant access to anybody within the city.
They're all.
We're not in the minutes, either in the documents.
I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
the
they're
document folder that you
Oh.
sent out, yes, correct.
Did you get access?
I did give them access.
Okay.
Did you give Jeff and Jennifer?
Whoever tried accessing it, I gave access to. It sends me, when you try accessing it, it automatically sends me an email, so then I grant access.
They couldn't get in there. I'm gonna ask the question anyway.
Doesn't really impact our meeting too much. Just a report on the roads that he's done in the past several years and figures about chips, which were interesting. Ready?
Okay.
It's 5 o'clock, and I'd like to call to order this month's meeting of the infrastructure committee. We'll start with a roll call. Council Allen,
Here.
Council Moore,
Here,
Mayor Rosenblatt. Here. Council Kelly. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from our May 1st, 2023 infrastructure committee. Motion seconded by Mayor Rosenblatt. Any corrections, deletions? All in favor of approving these minutes?
I wasn't here for that one.
Okay. All right, item number 2 is public works, and we have several things to discuss under public works tonight, starting with a discussion on the infrastructure chips funding status report.
All right, so like Councilor Kelly said, we have a whole bunch to go over tonight. First thing we'll go over is our typical infrastructure report. Mike is actually returning from vacation tomorrow, so I'm kind of filling in for him on this for tonight. Emergency water line project, we're actually wrapping up with that, should be completed here in the next couple of weeks. We've completed all of the sidewalk replacement and we moved on to replacing the curb. So it should take them a couple of weeks to finish the curb, and then that job will be done on the Lake Country Village side. On the other side, the contractor is wrapping up with service line connections to the new main. Once they're done with that, we'll have a little bit of restoration, and then we'll pump the existing main full of grout, abandon that, and the project will be completed.
You're talking about the Nevada Oval side or the foreground?
Nevada Oval is completed. We are on the foreground
Okay,
right now.
this is also a concern that we had people come and talk to council about the storage of material, as well as using parts of the oval as a parking area for equipment and worker vehicles.
Okay.
So, I certainly would like to, either you get it figured out now, or you can come back with an answer at some point about restoring the rest of the lawn.
Yes,
And getting a timeline, a more solid timeline on when that project's gonna be done.
yeah, so they'll be, I would say they have probably 2 weeks left of water line completion, and they'll go through and restore everything that was done with topsoil, see there. So, yep. Paving, so we actually started paving today. We did New York Road Extension. We did a section of Ohio. We did Lake Forest Drive. Tomorrow we will be doing a section of Nevada Oval. So that's the kickoff to our season. It'll be a very lengthy season, and we'll kind of go over that when we get to the next section of the road paving, but that is underway. Parks, beach and grounds, that's our typical field maintenance, restroom cleanup, general cleanup. We have crews working on catch basin repair, manhole repairs. We had a sewer issue today that they were working on. Street sweeping, we're running one street sweeper currently, and doing yard waste as well. Capital projects, we talked about the base water line project. New York Road, we had some warranty items that we called the contractor back to fix. Those have been completed. Cornelius Street, we've looked at a couple of different options for that and are talking with the engineer for the design for the upper Cornelius Street project. Special projects, we have some donated signs that we're doing some installations of. And then we are prepping for some special events, the Parks Come Alive, Mayor's Cup and 4th of July. So that is our infrastructure report. Next thing we'll talk about, included in the package that got sent out this week, with a little spreadsheet showing all of the road projects, the resurfacing, full depth reconstruction projects that we have completed since 2017. We have done a total of 48,000 linear feet of road projects, which ends up being about 16.5 miles of road. If you break that down into lane miles, because we have several roads that are more than just 2 lanes wide, it ends up being 37 miles of lane miles of roadway that we've completed in the last 5 years. Next one is CHIPS funding. So we did a breakdown of our CHIPS status funding. That was another spreadsheet that was included in that. So the CHIPS funding, basically we had a 2022 rollover of $3.9 million. So basically that was everything that we hadn't used from 2022 that rolls into 2023. Our 20
Just chips?
no, that's everything. When I say chips, that's our EWRS, our flooring routes, paved New York. And
Is the breakdown in there? So
it is, the breakdown is not in this spreadsheet. That was the total.
that was gonna be one of my questions. I can't remember, chips. I thought we got around 600,000.
So this year for the 2023 season, we got $470,000 for chips. Paved New York was 120,000. EWR was 75,000. State touring routes was 2.8 million. And the new POP, the pothole program that they started was 80,000.
Is that including the touring routes? Is that including some rollover?
No, that was just the numbers I just gave you were just our allocations for this year.
Yeah.
Our total number with our total rollover and the new balance is 7.5 million. So those are the funds that are available to us to use right now.
Is those touring routes, is that guaranteed for us, or we got money coming next
It
year?
is.
Is that a year?
So right now, they're telling us it's year to year, but they would like to continue doing it every year. So we don't know when it's gonna end, so we don't account for it being there until we get this letter that tells us it's there.
New York State's budget increased that pot of money about 30% statewide, so that's one of the reasons why we got a little bit more than we did last year.
Yes, yep.
It was on school rush. I didn't know.
But Councilmore, you're accurate, it's considered a temporary program. We are not anticipating, and we're not using that for future projects or anticipating these future projects.
Temporary program that we hope never ends.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it is a very good program.
And we use it well too. Yes, you know, we're not sitting around saying on $7 million. We're spending that money wisely. We're using it for road resurfacing.
Yeah, so what the mayor just said, so that $7.5 million, the breakdown on that sheet shows you what we have earmarked for those fundings for this year. So if you use up the funding that we have for this year, that leaves us with an approximate rollover balance going into 2024 of $672,000. So we're using just over $6 million of that funding. A good portion of that is for Margaret Street. 3.7 million is the Margaret Street project.
Yeah, that turnaround, the restrictions on that is pretty similar to chips. I mean,
They're almost, yeah, they're almost identical to chips. The only thing you can't use the turnarounds for is to buy equipment. So like our chips funding, we've been using that to buy like our plow trucks or our dump trucks or any excavators or skid steers. You can't do that with turnarounds funding, but you can do that with chips.
Mix it.
Yeah, yep. So we tend to use that money for our paving, and if we need to buy equipment, we use the chips funding to buy the equipment. So that's kind of the breakdown of the chips and turnaround funding. You guys have any more questions on that? Okay. So I guess now we will do a Margaret Street update. So crews are moving right along out at Margaret Street. We have almost completed all of the water line installation. Margaret Street water line is completely done and installed. They did a tie-in today for the Brinker Hall into Oak Street, so that line has now been completed. They've run approximately 400 feet of water line on Court Street, so they'll move on to Court Street and start running that the rest of the way. And hopefully be pretty close to completing that by the end of this week. What that?
The water line
Yes.
on court, you said the water line on court should be complete by the.
Hopefully by the end of this week.
And then tie-ins for Court, Brink, and the rest of Margaret Street.
Yes, those are scheduled for next week and the week after. We've got a little work to do with the tie-in here from Margaret Street and Cornelia Street because that puts the county building without water. So we'll probably schedule that for an evening job. That way we can shut it down when the county building is closed. Very similar to what we did with social services. We came in early in the morning to tie that in, so we didn't interrupt social services workers during the day because they had like 180 employees in that building.
And then when do we move on to sewer replacement, sewer and storm?
So they started sewer replacement on Court Street. They're about halfway done Court Street sewer replacement. They'll move from there to, I believe, Brinker Hall and then Margaret Street. Storm sewer starts, I believe, next week. And they will start carrying out the storm sewer, replacing that. Then once all of the utilities are done, they will tear out curb, sidewalk, existing road surface and subbase, put new subbase in, new curb, new sidewalk, new pavement. And then the theory is they'll do one half of the road. So they'll have the new surface there, then they'll flip to the other side of the road and do the same thing on that side of the road. For that portion of the project.
When are we anticipating them being done digging in the?
So just for the utilities,
Digging to replace utility.
so the utilities should be completed by mid-July, 100%.
Are we replacing all the laterals to the buildings?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Was, I had a chance to catch that.
I say to the buildings, the water service is done to the shut off. So the new shut off location is in the new utility strip, which is the area that's between the sidewalk and the curb. So we put a new shut off in there, we take the existing line, hook it into that new shut off. We have run into a couple of instances where those lines have been galvanized lines, which are frowned upon, and we're trying to get those out of the system. So we've contacted the building owners and found different ways where we can either abandon those and run a new line into the building, or they've had a fire line that we can tap their fire line for their service line and hook that right to their meter so that they don't have to pay to replace their service line. So we've run into some of those instances a couple of times. I'm sure we'll run into a few more.
Yeah, just don't wanna have to dig that back up.
Right, because especially galvanized line, because once you expose it to the air, it tends to start being really brittle. And then in that case, it's on the homeowner, the business owner to replace that. So if we can do it now, it's twofold. They don't have to do it later on, and then the restoration, they would have to pay to replace the curb, the sidewalk, which can get pretty costly. So now's the time to really get ahead of it, so we don't have to deal with that issue later on. So we are doing that.
Andrew, I would just like to say that it's apparent to me that Reifenberg is doing a very, very good job. And they are extremely courteous and amenable to any changes that have to be done to satisfy the downtown merchants. I've seen them bend over backwards.
Yeah, and coming from somebody who's been working with them every day, they really are top notch. They've been really great to work with. We've run into some issues where typically you would get contractors, oh, I want to get extra money for this, I want to get extra money for this. They've been real good about, hey, we're not doing this, so we'll just use the funding for this to do this. They've been great to work with, very knowledgeable, all the guys. I have no complaints about any of the guys so far, so they've been a good company to work with.
It also appears that they're on schedule, if not
Yes.
ahead of schedule.
They are on schedule, yes.
On schedule.
Yep, on schedule.
Good, it's good to hear. It just occurred to me, this is the last thing I'm gonna say. It just occurred to me that all this beautiful work is being done, building to building. But it was pointed out to me that our obligation or our work ends at the building property line.
Yes,
So a lot of the buildings downtown have tile and things that don't last forever. Nobody would expect them to, but it would be really nice if we could somehow coordinate and have the downtown building owners spruce up their entrance ways, and make sure they have fresh tile or at least repair.
yeah, I think you'll see a lot of that. I know as we were installing the water line, there were a lot of business owners that were coming out saying, hey, I'm looking at putting apartments upstairs. What do I need to do that? Well, let's throw in a 6-inch fire line now. That way we're not digging up the road next year because you want to do the apartments and they're going to require a sprinkler. So I have daily contact with a lot of business out there. So
It's good to know.
Okay, Andy, so, one of the big conversation topics regarding the street project has been, the tree removal. So I was wondering if you would be able to speak as to why trees were removed, because people are making all sorts of things and everything. And so
Yep.
we want to know the fact as to why trees were removed and what the plans are for them going forward.
sure. So there's a couple of reasons why the trees were removed. One of the smaller reasons, those particular trees were too big for that area. They were growing, they were rubbing against the buildings. We were getting a lot of complaints from building owners and their tenants because a windy day, they were scratching against the windows. So there was that. The bigger reason that those trees had to come out is because the storm sewer location goes right underneath those trees. So the trees had to come out so we can put the new storm sewer line in. And that's due to health department regulation that says you have to have a minimum separation of 10 feet between your water lines and your sanitary lines. So in order to maintain that separation, we had to push the storm sewer line to where those current or where the existing tree locations were. So those trees had to come out. And the root system of those trees, when they planted them, they didn't leave a big enough area for the root systems. So the roots were starting to come up and they were starting to heave all of the concrete and the bricks that were there. So it was becoming an ADA compliance
You
issue.
can certainly see it. in
Yeah,
some
a
areas,
tripping
yeah.
issue. So yeah, so those were the main reasons why they came out. Now going forward, we are replacing those trees. So they are getting replaced with a very similar type of tree, but one that doesn't grow quite as big, is more hardy for a downtown area. And we'll stand up to our cold weather and salt, because we do use salt downtown.
Okay.
So yes, the trees are getting replaced.
Nice and leafy, they'll provide some. nice
Yes, they
shade.
will provide some shade.
Very
Yep.
good. All right, thank you so much for taking
You're
the time to explain that.
Any other questions on Market Street?
Okay, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
let's move right on to item number 2.2, which is a draft resolution revising capital project H5111110.96, 2023 street resurfacing.
Motion.
Motion by Mayor Rosenquist, seconded by Councilor Talon. Discussion.
Well, I just had one question. We're gonna do these in the manner that we have in the past with the. You know, doing some of the work ourselves and.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so we do all the prep work. So this resolution is being brought forward because we did get more or some extra money this year with our CHIPS and touring routes funding. So we decided to go ahead and put some more roads on for road resurfacing this year. So we will hire a company to come in and mill. We will do all the milling around the utilities, all the prep work and cleanup, all the flagging, the trucking. And then we'll hire a company to pay, and we'll also do the trucking and flagging for that as well.
Good list.
It is, yep. It is a good list.
Be ambitious.
And,
Sorry.
and Beacon Street, that's gonna be next year now?
So Beekman Street should be next year, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
like I moved from this year. but
Yes, yep.
Okay,
Most of the work this year has been done at Ward 1 and Ward 3, so we got a little bit of Ward 6 going on there too. Spreading the love.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, if you remember, we did all the flats in the hill over the last couple of years, right? So,
The previous 2 years, they all about Ward 2.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
it would, you know, I think most people understand, and I said this on the radio this morning as well, most people understand that, you know, our inclement weather does terrible job to our roads, the freezing, thawing, the hot 90-degree weather versus the sub-zero weather for weeks on that, it's a challenge, so. And as per the sheet, you'll see, you know, we try to do anywhere between 3 to 8 miles of roads every single year, to repave and resurface. We're out here all year long, trying to patch potholes.
We have a very small paving window, so we get a lot of patching potholes throughout the winter time and cold weather.
I've seen the crews out there doing it.
They're out there daily.
More discussion on this.
Yeah, again, this is all paid via chips funding and mix of funding.
Very nice. Any other discussion? All in favor of moving this to the regular agenda? All opposed? None? All right. Resolution 2.3, authorize award of traffic study and design for Broad Street. Motion, Mayor Rosenquist. Second, Councilor Talon. Discussion.
This is a traffic study and potential redesign of Broad Street based on a number of concerns that we've seen over the years. The residential nature of Broad Street, as well as the business nature of Broad Street. It's in a school, it spans 2 different school zones, SUNY and middle school. What this is going to do is going to study the traffic count, also the young lady did get hit crossing the street on Broad Street. This is to do a study of the traffic and potential redesign of Broad Street to make it safer.
There's a question, do we put these out for bid or I don't remember this. Particular company coming up with it.
No, we actually just asked a couple companies for some numbers. Engineering services, you don't necessarily have to put out a bid because they're professional service. So I like to get a couple of bids just to keep the bids honest, so you're not just going to one company and they're, you know, price gouging. So this company had actually put together a proposal for Margaret Street that was really good, so I contacted them again for this one. And they were low bidder.
This is for the traffic study and design. This is not for construction or reconstruction, or potential reconstruction, I should say. That would be funded through CHIPS as well, if that were, if that comes to be.
Any more discussion? All in favor of moving this item to the regular agenda? Aye. Okay. Number 2.4, draft resolution authorizing the award of a traffic study for the Bailey Avenue and Oak Street intersection.
Both.
Moved by Mayor Rosenquist and seconded by Councilor Down. Discussion.
Yeah, I get a question on this one, because I go up that street quite often. Is there any reason we don't ever strike that? I mean, because that's a pretty snaky road, especially around the school. It gets, people are parked, especially when the kids are going to school or coming back. It's hard to navigate, not knowing, people are sometimes in your lane, but there's no divider on that, and especially where the intersection is, we have that bump out and then
Yep.
straightening up.
So the county does our straight hotline striping. Last year, they didn't get to all of our streets because of time and weather, so they are supposed to do it this year. That was one of the streets that they didn't get to last year. The parking aisle makes it a little difficult because they can't actually run right down there through it, because if there's a car parked there, they have to move the machine, so you're getting, a spot where you got new striping, a spot where you don't. So really, when they go down there, we need to know ahead of time so we can schedule a no parking through that area, so we can make sure that it gets completed. So that is something we're going to be looking into to make sure that gets struck properly this year.
Yeah, I was worried about those school areas.
Yeah, yep, and that's part of the reason for this. This particular intersection, I drive home through it every day, so you're basically leaving from Oak Street School, you're picking up speed, getting all the way to 374. So there's no real area to slow down. So people are doing 40, 45 through there. You get a lot of kids that are trying to cross there that are coming home from school up at Bailey Ave, and they're crossing right there. So that's the reason for this intersection study, is basically do a traffic count, and they're going to make a recommendation as far as what needs to be done at that intersection, whether there needs to be a stop sign at that intersection, or there needs to be a traffic light. The intersection is a little messed up too, because you got Riley Avenue that's kind of just right there, but it's not quite in line with Bailey. Robinson Terrace, I'm sorry, yes, Robinson Terrace. So yeah, they're not quite in line with each other, so that's one of the reasons for the traffic study. It's kind of a weird intersection.
Yeah, I know people, well, I think I've done it maybe once.
What? Turn right up Oak Street,
but then go down.
You have not done that. Nobody does.
What was? So yeah, that's the reason for this traffic study. There's not a design with this one like there is for Broad Street. It's basically the traffic count, and then they'll make recommendations for us to implement.
Any other discussion about this item? All in favor of moving to the regular agenda? Aye. Okay. Next is draft resolution 2.5, authorizing naming New York State Department of Transportation responsible for local official RLO. Please tell us about this.
So,
Motion canceled.
Oh, sorry, we need a motion. Continue. Mayor?
So an RLO is a responsible local official. Every municipality has to have one. Currently, the way we've been doing this is every time we do a project that needs an RLO, we name that RLO. So for PSAP, I was named RLO. For Cornelia Street, I was named RLO. There is an additional portion to being a responsible local official. It's called EEO. You deal with equitable business opportunity. So the RLO is responsible for making sure that the contractors meet their obligations for women and minority owned businesses. and making sure that they have employed the correct number of women or minorities. So there's an online programs for doing that. In order for myself to access that for our current projects, I have to be named the RLO, not just for specific projects, but overall. So once we have this resolution, I can send it to the state. They will give me access to the website so that I can keep track of that for these state and federally funded projects.
Okay. So we're naming New York State DOT as our RLO.
You are naming me as the city's responsible local official for federal and state projects.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of reading this, agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay. That concludes this portion of your presentation.
Thanks, guys.
And your
Thanks,
help.
sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Very much. Okay, now we move on to number 3, environmental. I'm gonna call on you probably. Explain some of these. We don't understand. Okay, so we have a draft resolution to authorize a 1-year extension for an existing contract hauling sludge from the WR. May I have a motion to continue this discussion? Councilor Moore,
Second.
Councilor Talon, thank you. Okay, John.
So we put these services out for bid last year before, and the contract usually provides for a series of renewals upon mutual agreement, so. The contract was agreed to extend the same bid prices last year to this year at no cost, basically. So just a 1-year renewal for that existing contract.
Any discussion about this renewal?
Yeah, in terms of hauling sludge, we went through this exercise not too long ago to find an appropriate traffic route for heavy equipment this 18th winter. So I believe at this point we rerouted that traffic outside of residential and outside our downtown. I have seen a number of 18-wheelers that typically would haul our sludge take the appropriate route. So thanks to John and his team for making that work. And certainly it's a challenge one way or the other. There's no real way we can keep 18-wheeler traffic out of parts of residential neighborhoods, but we can minimize the impact by pushing them to state routes.
Yes, I think one of those went through Ward 2, and we have some much happier residents there now as a result of the changes. So we appreciate that, John.
John, we still good with somebody accepting this stuff? I know these guys haul it, but there's always a question of whether different places will continue to accept stuff. Is that always
Disposal sites in general across the state are under a lot of stress and pressure, which is driving up the costs. Right now, 2/3 of our biosolids goes to Franklin County landfill, another third goes to a privately owned facility in Chattagat. Tip fees at both places have been increasing. We've got contracts in place for that, as have the hauling costs. So you probably recall we were in the process of studying what a long-term management strategy should be for our organics, including our wastewater biosolids. So we're in the middle of that now, because as we look to the future, hauling costs are not going to get less expensive, and the tip fees at the disposal sites are going to keep going up. And we're also seeing signs that the regulatory agencies, when they renew the permits at these facilities, are reducing or limiting the amount of biosolids that they're allowed to take. So we're trying to be proactive about pulling a study together and figuring out if landfilling in this place in Chattagat are really going to be sustainable and affordable long-term disposal options.
It's to be a mess.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. There's some really interesting things going on out there. Not to mention the fact that putting it in landfill is one thing, The private facility we go to turns it into kind of a fertilizer. A lot of municipalities do that and then ultimately land apply it. But there's always what they call compounds of emerging concern, new chemicals that are being discovered and or chemicals they know about, but all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, these are causing problems. So if we can minimize or get away from land allocation, then we don't have to be concerned about those kinds of issues. Can create other issues that we're gonna have to make sure we address if we decide to pivot away from land allocation, but that study's in progress now.
So we're thinking that landfills are the best way to go going forward.
From my perspective, landfilling's been great. It's been very affordable and we pack it, we ship it. It's not a community impact. However, landfills are under a lot of stress. They're getting limited on how much they can take. The state's long-term organics management strategy has been pretty clear. They don't want to see organics going to landfills. They feel there's better use. They started with food waste, trying to push that out. Paper waste and sewage biosolids are also identified in that report as and they'd rather see used in a different way. So we're going to look at some kind of novel approaches. Is one of the things we're looking at is can we digest and stabilize our wastewater solids, our organics, in a way that creates renewable energy like natural gas that can be used to make electricity. But then to convert the resulting solids, the solids that are left over that are less, into some kind of aggregate that can be used in making concrete or asphalt rather than spreading it on the land. Now, if it can be used in making concrete, then it's really bound, and we don't have to be as concerned about the potential for environmental or public health exposure to that material.
Good idea.
So.
Any other discussion on this item? All in favor of moving to the agenda? Aye. Okay. 3.2. Authorize CDM Smith WRRF Waterfront Integration Project Architectural Preliminary Design Engineering Services Proposal. Motion by Mayor Rosenquist, seconded. Councilor Talon. Discussion.
So this is a lot of years worth of work that's finally getting advanced. This goes back probably 12 or 15 years where the cleanup of the waterfront started by moving out the rail yard, the old marine salvage yard, dealing with brownfields issues, making lots of improvements down there. But when it started 15 years ago, the wastewater plant was identified as having potential impacts on the full use and enjoyment of that waterfront. And three impacts in particular: odors, noise, and aesthetics. That's this big hunk of ugly concrete. So we received a OWIA grant and financing award for almost $20 million worth of upgrades. There were three components there: upgrading the dewatering and some of the odor control systems, which has been completed. Upgrading, making additional odor control upgrades and improving the disinfection facilities. That's just about complete. Now, the third part is to upgrade the architecture of the plant. Those upgrades were kind of progressing in parallel with the Harborside Master Plan. Now that that's complete, and we've got some architectural concepts that have been vetted by the planning committee, we're ready to move forward in doing the design and construction of those architectural upgrades. So this contract is to do the preliminary design work to get it to 30% complete. That says, hey, here's what this is really going to look like and entail, and what we think it's going to cost. And then that's the point where we say, yes, we want to proceed. And then they do final design and we put it out for bidding and construction. So this is a
question. Sure. Some of those WIA funds you described available for construction from time to time.
Yes, yeah. So we've got somewhere between $5 and $6 million remaining from that original award. So we've got a sizable little war chest there. Now, the Harborside Master Plan included what's called an environmental learning center. which would be a really grand expansion of the entryway and provide space for a hydrologic and renewable energy type learning center. These architectural upgrades don't include that. They're going to include some, what I'm going to call interim architectural upgrades right at that entryway, but the environmental learning center is going to proceed on a separate path. One of the first things we need to do is think about forming a board to guide that pathway forward and to put together a comprehensive funding strategy. Because the typical funding strategies we use for water or wastewater upgrades really don't kind of fit with an environmental learning center. So, okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, I got a question here, not specifically about this, but am I to assume that, because I still get a lot of people talking about the odor down there. Is that as good as it's gonna get at this point?
I'm gonna say no. I think the acute odors that people experience are when hauled waste is being discharged right at the plant. Somebody mentioned to me today they were down there and boom, it hit really hard. It's happened to me a couple of times. The hauled waste that comes to the plant, we're planning on trying to relocate to a less densely populated area, probably out towards the old compost plant there. The reasons we haven't been able to pull the trigger and do that immediately is any wastewater that comes from that facility comes by a combined sewer overflow. And we're in the middle of evaluations and negotiations with DEC over what we can discharge and what we can't discharge. But the long-term solution to that is to have these wastes that are hauled discharged somewhere else so that we're not dumping right there in a heavily populated area.
Okay, so
So the future looks promising.
there is a future.
Yeah.
There's a future. You know, having given tours as well, one of the also generators of odors is the surface aeration that's used in the aeration tank. That too, we talked about this last year of converting that surface aeration to underwater bubbling aeration, which will produce the same result and be a lot less would have a lot less environmental impact in terms of the smell that the surface aeration gives.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing I noticed, like in the evening, I mean, the hauling during the day is a big issue. The biggest issue.
Right.
But I noticed when it's calm, you can.
The kind of earthy, musty odor.
Yeah, earthy.
That's a good word.
That's a good
So
term.
let's not mix that smell with our friends just north of us who are
That-
farming right now.
That is a good point.
No, that is, it's pretty heavy in there when it's calm. And I think maybe it speaks to what Chris said. I thought we had gone to the underneath bubbling.
We made grant applications to fund and upgrades to do that.
We haven't done that yet.
They have, yeah, but we haven't been given an award, haven't been scoring quite high enough, so we're trying to figure out a strategy to have a more competitive application. One of the things we thought about doing was packaging these aeration upgrades with the construction environmental learning center and make the argument that they go hand in hand, so. In order to advance the environmental learning center, we've also got to include this aeration. So we're working on that, but that strategy hasn't been successful yet, so we're looking at packaging a little differently, more competitive.
That does work.
What's that?
That does work.
Just like back here, there's no deliveries on a Saturday, correct?
Right.
Which keeps things nicer smelling for the farmers market, as people were wondering about that.
We do have a pretty new building now. So actually, they were looking at a big tent over the.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
hopefully the aesthetics are a little.
building is nice.
Yeah.
You can buy it the other day.
Further discussion on this item? All in favor of moving to the regular agenda?
Right?
Aye. All right, thank you, John. Any new business? You have one item of new business, I want to make sure we get on the record, and that is that Stephen on Stelter Road. Has an ongoing concern about trash on his street, Stelter Road. I think people visit the fast food places further up on Cornelia and cut through there, maybe use it as a dumpster.
Yeah, we're constantly getting phone calls. I'm assuming it's from the same constituent to go out and pick up trash.
It very
So
well
we're-
could be.
We're out there constantly.
He's out there constantly himself picking up trash. And we just wonder if there could be no littering sign, maybe that's a possibility. Maybe a trash can in that location.
Yeah, I don't know if the trash can's gonna work, because like you said, I think they're tossing it out their window as they're driving down the road. So unless they're a good shot, trash can's not gonna do much good. But
Well, I appreciate
Yes.
hearing the news that a lot of people are taking a look at it.
Yeah,
And
yep.
aware of it, trying to make changes, so I'm sure that constituent will appreciate hearing that. Any other new business? Motion to adjourn,
Motion.
Mayor Rosenquist, second. All in favor?
Well,
Uh,
We adjourn, 5:43.